All right, top of the hour, you're watching CNN. I'm Brooke Baldwin. Thank you for being with me. Jared Kushner is talking. He is the quietest member of the president's inner circle, at least publicly. But today, he just became the most high-profile member to step before Congress and explain his interactions with Russia during the campaign and also during the transition time. And really, the bottom line here, the president's son-in-law and top advisor is denying any collusion involving him or anyone else from within the campaign as far as he knows. He also stepped in front of cameras, which we never see, the statement he made in front of the White House shortly after meeting with Senate investigators. Here he was.
My name is Jared Kushner. I am senior advisor to President Donald J. Trump. When my father-in-law decided to run for president, I served his campaign the best I could because I believe in him and his ability to improve the lives of all Americans. And now, serving the president and the people of the United States has been the honor and privilege of a lifetime. I am so grateful for the opportunity to work on important matters such as Middle East peace and reinvigorating America's innovative spirit. Every day, I come to work with enthusiasm and excitement for what can be. I have not sought the spotlight. First in business and now in public service, I have always focused on setting and achieving goals and have left it to others to work on media and public perception. Since the first questions were raised in March, I have been consistent in saying that I was eager to share any information I have with the investigating bodies, and I've done so today. The record and documents I have voluntarily provided will show that all of my actions were proper and occurred in the normal course of events of a very unique campaign. Let me be very clear. I did not collude with Russia, nor do I know of anyone else in the campaign who did so. I had no improper contacts. I have not relied on Russian funds for my businesses. And I have been fully transparent in providing all requested information. Donald Trump had a better message and ran a smarter campaign, and that is why he won. Suggesting otherwise ridicules those who voted for him. It is an honor to work with President Trump and his administration as we take on the challenges that he was elected to face. Creating jobs for American people, keeping America safe, and eliminating barriers to achieving the American dream. Thank you very much, and I look forward to taking questions from the House committee tomorrow. Thank you.
No questions from the media there. He just turned around and walked back in the West Wing. Now, as part of his meeting with the Senate Intel Committee, Jared Kushner submitted this 11-page statement that confirms he indeed had 4 contacts with Russians. So let's begin with CNN Justice correspondent Jessica Schneider. So 11 pages. He spoke with the staffers there today on the Hill. What new details came out of Kushner's statement today?
Well, you know, Brooke, I'd say 11 pages worth of details. We really got an in-depth glimpse into this, and it was really the first time we'd heard so publicly from Jared Kushner about these 4 meetings with Russians during the campaign and the transition. Kushner saying in his statement he wanted to set the record straight. He did detail the 4 meetings he had between April and December 2016. The first one was previously undisclosed. It was a short meet and greet, Kushner said, with Russian ambassador to the U.S., Sergei Kislyak. Kushner did meet with him again in December to discuss U.S. policy in Syria. He also met with the chairman of VEB Bank in December as well. But it really was that June 2016 meeting with Donald Trump Jr. and that Russian lawyer, among others, that's been the most talked about as of late. And Kushner did address it head on, saying this. He said he didn't know much about it. He said he attended at the request of Don Jr. And he said he didn't read the chain of emails that promised it would be to hand over dirt on Hillary Clinton. Kushner instead reiterated that he believed it was about Russian adoptions. That's actually what was discussed. But Kushner said he quickly realized it was a waste of time. Kushner writing in his statement this, saying, "I actually emailed my assistant from the meeting after I had been there for 10 or so minutes and wrote, 'Can you please call me on my cell?' need excuse to get out of the meeting. He said that he did leave a short time later. So really, Brooke, these are some of the details that Kushner presumably discussed with the Senate Intelligence Committee investigators this morning. He was over on Capitol Hill for about 2.5 hours. He was answering those questions behind closed doors, though not under oath. So we're not exactly sure what he said, but presumably it was along the lines of this statement. And Brooke, like Jared Kushner said there, he will go before the House Intelligence Committee, both the members and the staffers, tomorrow. Brooke?
All right. Jessica, thank you for the setup. Let's take a deeper dive into all of this. Joining me now, CNN political commentator Errol Lewis, who is also a political anchor for Spectrum News. And Andrew Rice is with us, contributing editor to New York Magazine, who wrote this massive profile about Jared Kushner earlier in January. So, gentlemen, nice to have you both here. And Errol, just first to you. I mean, Jessica perfectly teed it up. He said in the 11-page statement, reiterated it today in front of the White House. No collusion on behalf of myself or anyone in the campaign. We did find out about this previously undisclosed meeting with the Russian ambassador that had not been out there. Hearing from Senator Ron Wyden, Democrat Oregon, saying, hang on a second, all this information we're getting actually brings on more questions than answers. How do you read today? Is this all right? Fulfilled his obligation, answer questions, move on? Or
no, not yet. It's a remarkable document. I would urge all of you viewers to take a look at it because it paints the portrait of sort of chaos and disorganization at a level that is somewhat alarming, actually, for somebody who now has the portfolio and the importance and the prominence that Jared Kushner has. I mean, I read through it and I said, well, will the real Jared Kushner please stand up? He's either the person that's portrayed in this 11-page document is somebody who doesn't read his own email, so that an email that says Russia, Clinton, personal and confidential, he doesn't read that, but he shows up at the meeting.
Right.
He doesn't stay at the meeting. He doesn't understand that when a Russian representative is talking about adoption, they're talking about sanctions. They're talking about the number one issue causing tension between the U.S. and Russia. He doesn't understand these things, and yet he now has a portfolio that includes trying to settle the Middle East peace situation, globetrotting to Iraq into an active war zone to be the president's eyes and ears, organizing a state meeting by the president of China, running a council that's supposed to bring private sector innovation into the federal government. These two things cannot both be true at the same time.
I want to come back to your point on the email as well in a second, but to you, I mean, just reading your piece in January, the whole thesis was essentially, Jared Kushner is more like the president than anyone realizes. And watching him today and this voice that no one could close their eyes and imagine what he sounded like, this mystique, as we discussed before the show came on. Who is the real Jared Kushner?
I think you saw him in that statement. I mean, the line, the most memorable line, I think, from the statement was about sort of to suggest that Donald Trump didn't win fair and square, was ridiculing the American people.
He ran the smartest campaign, winning fair and square.
That sounds like the Jared Kushner. I think people who know him have said that he's very. He's very upset after the campaign at the tone of some of the coverage of Trump's victory, and I think probably the last 6 months of Russia headlines have only made him feel even more embattled in that sense.
Here's the question. Let me just stay with you off of Errol's point on this whole email as one example, right? So we all know you get emails, you have items in your calendar, and apparently he just responded. Jared Kushner responded to, I have a meeting Trump Tower with Don Jr. And according to Kushner, neglected to read the whole trail of the previous email chain on what was promised at said meeting. Apparently, dirt on Hillary Clinton, which we reportedly came to not be. Ignores the email subject line, which is essentially Russia, Clinton, private and confidential. And if you read the New York Times this morning, Frank Bruni said this. He got the emails about emissaries of a foreign adversary bearing dirt, but what do you know? Read right over the subject line that said Russia, Clinton, private and confidential, no flashing lights in those proper nouns, no blaring signs in those particular adjectives, and again, the phone call then, or I guess the email while he's sitting in the meeting to the assistant, hey, get me out of here 10 minutes in. How skeptical should staffers be up on Capitol Hill when you hear something like that?
Well, I mean, I think that there's sort of two layers of it. One is like sort of what's legally provable. I mean, it's difficult to prove that somebody noticed what a subject line in an email was, and then there's sort of like what would any rational person believe, and I think maybe Jared has a little bit harder time on the second one, that he would have showed up to a meeting with Don Jr. without having any knowledge of what the agenda was, particularly when he takes pains in the rest of to talk about how incredibly busy he is and how many people are demanding his attention. So there's a slight internal contradiction there, I feel like.
It also opens up the possibility that if he's as hard-pressed and sort of disorganized as the statement makes him sound, he could be going into meetings where the Russians are running some agenda that he's not even aware of. I mean, if you meet with a Russian ambassador...
Which is alarming in a different sense.
Exactly. I mean, if you meet with a Russian ambassador and cannot remember his name, that ambassador may have gotten information out of you or just the fact of the meeting and might be using it as part of some larger strategy of which Jared Kushner apparently was unaware.
But isn't a larger piece of this, as we've been hearing, Donald Trump and folks within the White House, railing on the fake news media and these reports, fake news of, people within the campaign or the transition team meeting with Russians. And yet you have out of his son-in-law's 11-page statement, the opposite, essentially confirming that the fake news is fact.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, look, certain words mean certain things in Trump world. I think we got a big taste of that during the campaign, and it has continued into the administration. When Donald Trump says so-and-so is being very unfair or so-and-so is being biased, what he means is that information is coming forward that's not favorable to Donald Trump. When they say that it's fake news, it means the news is accurate, the news is factual, but it paints them in a bad light. And certainly, as we just saw from the statement in Trump world, when you say there's a problem here with all of these sort of undisclosed meetings and other issues going on with the Russians, they hear that as you're saying our administration is illegitimate. And I don't know if that's genuine. I don't know if it's political. I don't know if it's strategic. But the reality is one can clearly logically say, yes, he won. He flipped counties in Wisconsin from Obama to Trump. He won Michigan. He won Pennsylvania. He won the industrial Midwest. He won. He's the president. It's all legitimate. However, there's something going on with these undisclosed meetings.
Agree, but at the same time, we're just trying to look at it from all perspectives. Just finally to you, does the public need to give Jared Kushner credit, as he and his lawyers have been promising for months and months and months that they would speak, maybe not to the public, but to the very important people up on Capitol Hill who are investigating on this Russia probe? That yes, he will sit and answer those questions. Yes, he's going back tomorrow. Do we give him credit?
Sure. I mean, I think, to the extent that he appeared willingly, wasn't as far as, he wasn't subpoenaed to come and testify, obviously he gets credit for that. I mean, I will say that the one part that seems quite credible and conforms to my own reporting is that, both the campaign and the transition were incredibly ad hoc affairs. They kind of made it up as they went along, especially during the transition, because let's be honest, I don't think even they expected to win the presidency. Jared Kushner never expected to be doing a transition. And so to that extent, I think we can give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt in terms of some of those contacts that he had, that it's possible that he didn't realize the gravity of them or the way that they would look to outsiders months later.
Well, the whiting out of the security clearance, but now we know his version of events. So from here on out, if anything changes, we have a problem. Errol and Andrew, thank you so much on all things Jared Kushner. President Trump once again publicly insults his attorney general. Have you seen this? Calling Jeff Sessions beleaguered. What's this about? Is this the president trying to get one of his earliest supporters, most loyal soldiers, to quit? Let's talk about that. Also ahead, it is his first full week on the job, and Anthony Scaramucci already dealing with mixed messages from the White House. And just a short time from now, the president will be delivering a statement on health care just 24 hours before the expected procedural vote in the Senate. Lots happening on this Monday. You're watching CNN. I'm Brooke Baldwin.
President Trump trying to step up the pressure on his fellow Republicans to pass a health care reform bill. The president about to make a statement later this afternoon. Earlier today, he tweeted this, quote, "Republicans have a last chance to do the right thing on repeal and replace after years of talking and campaigning on it." He also tweeted, quote, "If Republicans don't repeal and replace the disastrous Obamacare, the repercussions will be far greater than any of them understand." Let's go to our congressional correspondent, Phil Phil Mattingly is joining us from Capitol Hill. Phil, first of all, update us on where the health care debate stands right now and what happens next.
Yeah, the big question, Wolf, is whether or not they can get the votes to actually start the debate on the bill. That's the goal for this week. Senate leaders are targeting tomorrow as the first opportunity to have that procedural vote. But I think the most interesting element right now, Wolf, is what you were laying out. The White House has really started a full-on public blitz. You've got the president's statement here in a couple hours. Over the weekend, you had Vice President Mike Pence in Ohio putting pressure on Senator Rob Portman, a Republican holdout up to this point. And then later this evening, the president travels to West Virginia, where Shelley Moore Capito, the West Virginia Republican senator, will be joining him. She is another holdout. This is the type of effort, Wolf, that we're used to in past administrations, and frankly, the type of effort you've heard from a lot of senior Republicans. They wish the White House would have been pushing up to this point. The real question becomes now, Wolf, is it too late? As they go into this week, nobody really thinks that they have the votes to move forward on this yet. This is some serious arm twisting by the administration. So the question becomes, can they turn these votes over the course of the next 24, 48 hours to really get this process on track? We'll have to wait and see.
We certainly will. We'll watch it together with you every step of the way. Phil Mattingly up on Capitol Hill. Up next, the new Russia sanctions bill is triggering mixed signals out of the White House. Will the president sign this bipartisan measure that puts more pressure? Lawmakers are set to vote this week on slapping new sanctions on Russia over election meddling. The bill has wide support from both parties, but will the White House support it? It depends on who you ask.
He hasn't made the decision yet to sign that bill one way or the other. He'll make that decision when he makes it.
We support where the legislation is now, and we'll continue working with the House and Senate to put those tough sanctions in place on Russia.
Let's discuss this and more with our chief national security correspondent, Jim Sciutto, Margaret Tulloff, senior White House correspondent for Bloomberg News, and the new president of the White House Correspondents Association, and Jeff Mason. He's the White House correspondent for Reuters, the outgoing White House Correspondents Association president. Margaret, congratulations. Today's your first day as president.
It is. Thank you, Wolf.
Good work. Thanks. And Jeff, thanks for the good work you did as the outgoing president. What do you think of these conflicting messages? You cover the White House on a day we hear one thing from one person, another thing from literally with only a few minutes apart.
It's hard to say. My first impression when I heard those two clips was that maybe Sarah was more in the know and that Anthony hadn't actually discussed it with the president, because it doesn't seem like she would have gone out there and said he was going to support it if she hadn't had that conversation. But it's, I don't know. I mean, and that will no doubt be something that they will realize they need to be sure and talk ahead of time and get their story on the same page.
New White House Communications Director, are you hearing that there could be some more changes, a little bit more shakeup coming up?
Well, you know, there are two things to watch for, and one is what changes he wants to install, and the other is really how he intends to serve. Does he intend to serve a traditional communications director role, or is this kind of the role that gets him in the door and then things shift around a little? I think Jeff is right that he's still getting his feet wet and familiarizing himself, although he's not on the clock just yet. He's at the White House now all day as we speak, and we may expect to see him traveling, but I think President Trump has very little room not to go along with the sanctions bill if that's what passes.
Because even if he doesn't, if he vetoes it, his veto will presumably be overridden. Enormous support in the House and Senate.
I think the question that I'd be looking for is there any sort of strings attached to his support or tacit support for this?
I was surprised by the conflicting messages we got from these two White House officials. You go out on the Sunday talk shows, you think you'd have a meeting, you know you're going to be asked about this issue, and you sort of come up with the same answer. Presumably that's what normally happens. Did not happen this time. You know, Jim, let's talk a little bit about the intelligence community. You and I were at that Aspen Institute forum over the past few days, the Russian meddling in the U.S. presidential election. At the Aspen Security Forum, we heard from current intelligence officials, the people the president appointed, who said they had no doubt. Listen.
There is no dissent, and I have stated that publicly.
Everyone's on board.
And I've stated it to the president.
I am confident that the Russians meddled in this election, as is the entire intelligence community.
No doubt at all, and I stand behind the intelligence community assessment that we produced.
No doubt at all, but in an extraordinary exchange that the new White House Communications Director had with Jake Tapper, we got a very different word from the President of the United States.
There's a lot of disinformation out there. You know, somebody said to me yesterday, I won't tell you who, that if the Russians actually hacked this situation and spilled out those emails, you would have never seen it. You would have never had any evidence of them, meaning that they're super confident in their deception skills and hacking. My point is, all of the information isn't on the table yet. But here's what I know about the president.
Wait, Anthony.
Let me finish.
Well, you're making a lot of assertions here. I don't know who this anonymous person is that said that if the Russians had actually done it, we wouldn't have been able to detect it. But it is the unanimous.
How about it was the president, Jake?
Okay, it's the consensus of the intelligence community.
He called me from Air Force One, and he basically said to me, "Hey, this is maybe they did it, maybe they didn't do it."
All right, so everybody else, outgoing intelligence officials, the current intelligence officials, people he appointed, say it was the Russians. Everybody agrees except the president.
Listen, the president's creating his own reality here and defending his own reality, and is clearly still able to hire aides who are willing to defend that same reality that contradicts what the intelligence community has assessed here. And keep in mind, one of the arguments that some in his camp have used is, well, those were Obama administration appointees, the Clappers of the world, et cetera, who made this judgment, were in charge when the judgment was made. We saw Dan Coates there. He's President Trump's selection for Director of National Intelligence, the senior most intelligence official in the country, who said there is no dissent. And that gets to a second point that Trump and others have raised, saying, well, it was only 4 intelligence agencies, not everybody was on board, which is just frankly not true. And you hear Dan Coates there again saying there's no dissent. I mean, that 4 versus 17 debate, won't get into it, but a lot of those agencies, like the Coast Guard intelligence wing, have no business in identifying whether there was a hack. And yet the president continues to stick to this. We just don't know inside his head why he continues to stick to that at the expense of the credibility, really, of his own intelligence agencies.
Go ahead.
I think it all comes down to any concern that would undermine his victory. And you saw that in Jared Kushner's statement outside the White House just a few moments ago, where he said any suggestion about otherwise about why he won ridicules the voters who put him into the White House. And I think that's completely connected to his lack of desire to really embrace the intelligence on the Russia findings.
And, I interviewed at that Aspen Security Forum, Margaret, the former Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, former CIA Director, John Brennan, and they said that the president's criticism of the U.S. intelligence community is so counterproductive. I want you to listen to some of what they said.
When the United States has to go to our partners and allies and say, U.S. intelligence has this information or has this assessment and we're looking for their support. What does it say as far as, when we have something about our adversaries, that our adversaries could say, well, that's U.S. intelligence. You already say that it's not worth, the paper it's written on. These types of comments are just disgraceful, never should have happened, and the people and the person who said that should be ashamed of themselves.
I think the men and women of the intelligence community will continue to convey truth to power, even if the power doesn't necessarily listen.
Both really outraged by the president's comparison to Nazi Germany of the intelligence community. It really irritated them.
We're all looking at Anthony Scaramucci to understand what sort of a new era it's going to usher in terms of messaging. But this really is something, a policy and an approach that is set from the top. And no change in staff can really shape what the president wants to do more than the president, and what he wants to do and how he wants to shape that,
If I could just add, you were there, of course, witnessing that conversation with Clapper and Brennan was really a truly somber moment. The former head of the CIA agency, years in the intelligence service under multiple administrations, former director of national intelligence, Clapper, years of service in the military and intelligence, and they were beyond exasperated. It struck me, and I wonder if you shared this, they were sad.
Yeah.
They were sad about this assault on these institutions here, and that was really remarkable conversation.
Yeah, you could see the pain that they couldn't believe the president of the United States would speak about the intelligence community, the men and women, the professionals along those lines. We're going to continue to have much more on all of this, but right now we're out of time. Jim, Margaret, and Jeff, thanks to all of you. Well, that's it for me. I'll be back 5 p.m. Eastern in the Wolf Blitzer. It's 1 p.m. here in Washington, 8 p.m. in Moscow, 9:30 p.m. in Kabul, Afghanistan. Wherever you're watching from around the world, thanks very much for joining us.
This is CNN Breaking News.
We're following breaking news. We're waiting to hear directly from Jared Kushner from the White House. You're looking at the microphone there outside the West Wing. The president's son-in-law and trusted advisor spent much of the day so far up on Capitol Hill answering questions from Senate Intelligence Committee staffers. At any moment now, we're told we expect to hear directly from Kushner. He'll be making a public statement. We'll have live coverage of that as soon as it happens. We expect that to begin momentarily. In the meantime, let's bring in our senior White House correspondent, Jeff Zeleny. He's over at the White House. Our national correspondent, Suzanne Malveaux, is up on Capitol Hill. Suzanne, first of all, take us through what happened so far over the course of these past few hours during Kushner's meeting up on Capitol Hill. Other than Jared Kushner's account, will we be hearing any of his statements so far to these congressional staffers?
Well, Wolf, it was true to form about 2 hours or so, as it was promised, going before the staffers, the Senate staffers of the Senate Intelligence Committee. It was Jared Kushner, his attorney, Abby Lowell, and a note taker. Also present there about a half dozen Senate staffers, and a transcript that was taken of that interview, a transcript that the legal team says that they certainly do not object to being made public. That is something that we don't know when it will be made public, but it certainly will be available. Also, we were told before this meeting that, according to a source, that Jared Kushner would take all questions. Our Ted Barrett, producer, asked him on his way out whether or not he, in fact, did do that. He said, yes, he had all the questions that they had. He said that it went very well. He is on his way to the White House, and we do know this was not sworn testimony, but tomorrow he's going to go before the House Intelligence Committee. That will be sworn testimony, also expected to be interviewed before members of that committee, not just the staffers, and that a transcript would be made available. As you know, Wolf, this is all a part of a very concerted effort, an orchestrated effort, if you will, to show some transparency from Jared Kushner and his team going to the White House to make a statement very shortly. Wolf?
Even though, Suzanne, it was not sworn testimony, you can't lie to congressional staffers or congressional members. If you do, that's a crime. So where do we stand right now, Suzanne, on Donald Trump Jr., Paul Manafort, the former campaign chairman, and their appearance before these various committees?
Well, Wednesday, the Senate Judiciary Committee is going to be taking a look at some notes, some records that were provided by Donald Trump Jr. as well as Paul Manafort. They have been behind the scenes negotiating with this committee. A lot of people quite frustrated that Donald Trump Jr. is not going to be testifying publicly as he initially had offered, but rather behind the scenes working out these negotiations for these records. Also interviews to follow later with the staffers and potentially with those committee members before any kind of public testimony. Senator Chuck Grassley, who's the chair of that committee, kind of defensive, if you will, in these tweets, a series of tweets that he's been sending out, he and Senator Dianne Feinstein. The latest one saying, here I'm going to read it, Wolf, that on-record interview with my and Senator Feinstein staff for hours is no walk in the park, can be tougher than few minutes with members in hearing. So a little bit of pushback from Grassley today saying, look, you might not necessarily publicly hear their testimony anytime soon, but bottom line that Dianne Feinstein said is they will get some answers, or at least they are determined to, Wolf.
Very interesting. Suzanne, stand by. Jeff, the son-in-law, the president's senior advisor, while he was facing some of those tough questions, the president was tweeting this, among other things. Let me put it up on the screen. So why aren't the committees and investigators, and of course our beleaguered AG, Attorney General, looking into crooked Hillary's crimes and Russia relations? Talk to us about this very, very controversial tweet, the apparent message to the Attorney General of the United States, the former Senator Jeff Sessions, calling him beleaguered.
Well, certainly very interesting if you dissect that. I mean, one, the president obviously trying to redirect attention to some other things. I mean, as his son-in-law is, before the committee behind closed doors, this is pretty extraordinary, Wolf. This marks a new chapter in this ongoing investigation here. Someone in the president's family, certainly his inner circle as well, on Capitol Hill. So the president certainly trying to divert attention, if you will. But if you look at that carefully, Wolf, I was most struck by the Attorney General's comments. He called him beleaguered. This is the Attorney General of the United States, Jeff Sessions, one of the earliest supporters of this president. It is the latest attempt from this president to try and draw attention to Jeff Sessions. He's very displeased with him, as we know, because he recused himself from this Russia investigation. But Wolf, it continues to beg the question, does the president want his Attorney General to stay on? I am told that they have still not had a face-to-face meeting since that interview last week with the New York Times, when the president just exploded and unloaded on his attorney general. So, Wolf, that was very interesting there in those words. But I think, as Suzanne was saying, I believe what we're going to hear from Jared Kushner as he stands outside the White House momentarily is talking a bit more about his answers to the questions this morning. And he put out a fairly extraordinary 11-page document this morning that talked about the 4 specific meetings he had with the Russian officials. And let's break those down for just a second. I think we have this. The first is a handshake that he had with the Russian ambassador. That was during a speech at the Mayflower Hotel. The second, of course, this meeting we've talked about so long, in June 2016, the meeting with the Russian lawyer that he says he was trying to extract himself out early. The second 2 are after the election, of course. He had a meeting with the ambassador, the Russian ambassador to the U.S. on December 1st, 2016. And then again on December 13, Wolf, this could be the most important one of all, a meeting with a Russian banker who is very close to Vladimir Putin. So those are the 4 specific elements that Jared Kushner went into the meeting talking about. Now, we did not know about all of these meetings, so that, of course, is something that the Senate staff was certainly burrowing in on. But we do not believe that Jared Kushner will take questions when he speaks this afternoon in just a short period of time here, Wolf.
He will be making a rare public statement. We'll have live coverage. That's coming up fairly soon. Our Jeff Zeleny, Suzanne Malveaux, guys, thanks very much. As we await Jared Kushner and his statement, let's talk about what the latest developments are all about. With us here, our chief political analyst, Gloria Borger, our chief political correspondent, Dana Bash, our CNN legal analyst, Laura Coates, and Ryan Lizza, CNN political analyst, Washington correspondent for the New Yorker magazine. Like all of us, Gloria, you've gone through the 11-page document. Pretty extraordinary that in advance of this interview he had with these congressional staffers, he publicly released what he was about to say, and then he stood around for about 2.5 hours or so answering their questions. All of this is very dramatic.
Well, it is very dramatic, and he kind of took a page from Comey's book by putting his testimony out there, although he isn't testifying publicly as the former FBI director did. And I think he felt that he needed to answer all the questions about those 4 particular meetings, which, by the way, the media has written about and knew about. I think there are still questions that need to be answered, and I think that this is probably what they're talking about behind closed doors. I think they're going to want to know more about his ties to Russians as a result of his business. He was very careful today to say, I have not relied on Russian funds to finance my business activities in the private sector. That's a very, carefully written statement. And I think they're going to want to know more about the analytics that he headed up during the campaign, because there have been some stories about whether the Russians had tried to hack into a lot of analytics. And so I think these are going to be areas that they're going to pursue. But as for these 4 meetings, he made it very clear there was nothing nefarious there.
Dana, we've covered Congress, all of us, for a long time. Usually somebody who is a witness releases an advance statement before an open hearing. This is what I'm about to say in my opening prepared remarks. Rarely, I don't remember a time when I've seen someone release a statement like this before a closed-door private session, not with senators or congressmen, but with staffers.
It's absolutely unusual, but it is in keeping with what is clearly the Kushner strategy, his legal team strategy, which is not to say much about the individual news stories that have come out about pretty much definitely everything that he mentions in this 11-page, document, testimony, whatever we'd like to call it, everything from his meeting with the Russian ambassador to the meeting that was during the transition back to June of 2016 when he attended the meeting that Donald Trump Jr. set up with the Russian lawyer. So it is unusual, but and my point in saying it's in keeping with their strategy, they wanted to control it. They wanted to get it out all at once. And the narrative that we're hearing from Kushner world, and I know Gloria's heard this too today, is they might have taken a hit, and they clearly did take a hit in public relations for the past several months by keeping this all to themselves and waiting until they got it all together in one big document, but that they wanted to show that they're kind of playing within the confines of the investigations and that they wanted to preserve this information for the Senate investigators to make it clear, at least to appear to be cooperating as much as they can.
You know, he was joined, Laura, in this session. Abby Lowell, who's a well-known lawyer here in Washington, his new lawyer. He was right there. He's had enormous experience in dealing with these kinds of issues. What's the difference between testifying or answering questions before staffers as opposed to a formal session where you're sworn in before members of Congress?
Well, the consequence of saying a falsehood would be the distinction here. But in reality, in public relations or in terms of legally speaking, if you present misinformation and you intentionally try to mislead congressional staffers, Congress, the public, you do have a public relations act. You also have a legal consequence as well. What they're trying to do, and you're right, by getting ahead of the story and crafting the narrative, that 11-page document said to me that lawyers had their hand in ensuring that whatever Jared Kushner said was not about having malicious intent, that he was trying to show that he did not have the ill will or intent to satisfy a legal doctrine, that he was perhaps the unwitting, overwhelmed person who was asked to multitask in too many ways. And in doing so, I think he has shielded himself from a lot of legal ridicule. He has not exonerated his fellow campaigners, however, did not mention much of them. But what you're seeing here is a very carefully crafted narrative to try to avoid having any legal consequences of whatever testimony he does ultimately give.
And even though he wasn't sworn in, if he lied, that's a crime.
Yes, and the idea that you would just be able to say, well, I'm lying to the media, we're out of that at this point in time. We're talking to congressional staffers who will then turn over information that their congressman will rely upon to then be able to investigate further. And you are now seeing somebody who's aware of the consequences. We're out of the political realm. You're in the legal realm right now. Remember, Jeff Sessions fell into this trap in a way of giving a statement, even though it was for a congressman, Al Franken, by giving information that was not comprehensive enough to allow people to say, I understand you're not trying to mislead the public and Congress.
I want to, Ryan, get through this very controversial tweet from the president today, and I'll put it up on the screen. So why aren't the committees and investigators, and of course our beleaguered AG, Attorney General, looking into crooked Hillary's crimes and Russia relations? It's a pretty extraordinary tweet going after the Attorney General of the United States.
Well, it's a little
hold on a second. Here comes Jared Kushner walking out of the West Wing of the White House down the driveway to the microphone. A rare public statement. Let's listen in.
My name is Jared Kushner. I am senior advisor to President Donald J. Trump. When my father-in-law decided to run for president, I served his campaign the best I could because I believe in him and his ability to improve the lives of all Americans. And now, serving the president and the people of the United States has been the honor and privilege of a lifetime. I am so grateful for the opportunity to work on important matters such as Middle East peace and reinvigorating America's innovative spirit. Every day, I come to work with enthusiasm and excitement for what can be. I have not sought the spotlight. First in business and now in public service, I have always focused on setting and achieving goals and have left it to others to work on media and public perception. Since the first questions were raised in March, I have been consistent in saying that I was eager to share any information I have with the investigating bodies, and I've done so today. The record and documents I have voluntarily provided will show that all of my actions were proper and occurred in the normal course of events of a very unique campaign. Let me be very clear. I did not collude with Russia, nor do I know of anyone else in the campaign who did so. I had no improper contacts. I have not relied on Russian funds for my businesses. And I have been fully transparent in providing all requested information. Donald Trump had a better message and ran a smarter campaign, and that is why he won. Suggesting otherwise ridicules those who voted for him. It is an honor to work with President Trump, and his administration as we take on the challenges that he was elected to face. Creating jobs for American people, keeping America safe, and eliminating barriers to achieving the American dream. Thank you very much, and I look forward to taking questions from the House committee tomorrow. Thank you.
All right, not sticking around answering reporters' questions, and there are a lot of reporters' questions. He did answer questions for more than 2 hours earlier up on Capitol Hill from this closed-door meeting with congressional investigators, repeating now publicly what he said in his opening statement, a statement that he released before he went up to Capitol Hill today. He said, "I did not collude, nor know of anyone else in the campaign who colluded with any foreign government. I had no improper contacts. I have not relied on Russian funds to finance my business activities in the private sector." Basically, Gloria, reiterating publicly now, hearing his voice, which we haven't heard all that often,
Right.
Reiterating what he said in this written statement.
You know, reiterating, but also taking it into the political realm, where he made it very clear, look, Donald Trump had a better message, he ran a better campaign, and suggesting otherwise ridicules those who voted for him. Meaning that this whole Russia controversy, you know, the implication is the whole Russia controversy is being perpetrated by Democrats who can't stand the result of the election. And it was, you know, it was a political statement coming from Jared Kushner.
Yeah, and I think to even sort of take that another step, we often talk about when people go out and speak for this president, they are speaking for an audience of one. That line was for that audience.
Right.
This is for you, you know, father-in-law, Mr. President. You know, I believe that anybody who questions the legitimacy of your election is belittling your voters. I did think that, you know, because this was legalese, and I want to know what you think of this since you're the lawyer here, I did not rely on Russian money for my businesses.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, he mentioned it also in the statement, but I think just even hearing him say it out loud, it doesn't say I didn't ask them for any money to help with,
or didn't get any,
or didn't get any. I didn't rely on. So I thought that was interesting. And then just kind of big picture, the notion of him saying it back in March, that when this all started to go out in the press, that he started saying that, and I look forward to answering questions. He's trying to answer to the public relations question. You know, this whole thing is about his legal future and his legal culpability or potential culpability. But the reality is that by not saying the things he said in this statement or whatever he said behind closed doors and letting it stay out there in the public realm for months without a real public answer, has really contributed to his father-in-law and the president he's working for, his agenda being sidelined.
Laura, what did you hear in that statement?
Well, his statement essentially is why most people hate lawyers, because we talk in this, not me, of course, but every other lawyer besides myself, in a very nuanced way that's based on trying to clearly define terms that you cannot then hook to a criminal statute. The reliance questions, what I actually knew. One thing you always tell your clients are things like, do not try to remember. If you can remember it instantly, fine. But if you don't, don't try. Don't go out of your way to be proactively coherent or remember things about things happening. What you saw was that. The repetitive nature of what he already released to the public earlier today. But again, you have somebody who a few weeks ago was saying that he's more than willing and forthcoming to volunteer to come up and talk about all that he knows until a lawyer gets involved and says, listen, craft your response with an eye towards litigation, because anything you say can, should, and will be used against you in the court of public opinion and certainly before Congress. And so he was very, very nuanced in his language, and nothing that he said, if you can look at it closely, nothing he said is an element of an intent or a crime you can actually hook to it. It's all about him saying, excuse me, I didn't know about this. I didn't ultimately rely on any of this information. And by the way, this is a political issue, not a legal one. Right. Yeah.
And Abby Lowell, his attorney, who's well regarded here in Washington, I'm sure vetted. And
communications team in town. Can the president's new communication director get the White House?